You need to understand your position in this organization. Mac, Robert Stevens didn't even look up when he said it. His fingers were busy straightening papers on his desk, making sure every edge lined up perfect. We were sitting in conference room B at Titan Manufacturing, the one with the broken air conditioning and that persistent smell of machine oil that never quite went away. I'm Mac Thompson, 47 years old, and I've been keeping this steel plant's automation systems running for 28 years. That morning, I thought I was just going to another routine compensation review. Turns out I was about to learn exactly what 28 years of keeping workers safe was worth to them. Robert slid a paper across the table. His watch caught the fluorescent light. Expensive, probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. This outlines your updated compensation structure for the upcoming fiscal year, he said in that flat management voice they all perfect after years of delivering bad news. I looked down at the document, Senior Network Operations Engineer, 28-year service record, merit increase 2.8%. Below that, in smaller print, like they hoped I wouldn't notice, compensation aligned with organizational equity standards. I'd seen that phrase before. It was corporate speak for we've decided what you're worth and arguing won't change our minds. 2.8%, I said quietly. Correct. That falls within the standard range for senior technical staff. I leaned back in that uncomfortable chair. The Air Force taught me patience, how to stay calm when hydraulic systems failed at 30,000 feet. 12 years in the service gave me that discipline. But this wasn't equipment failure or emergency protocols. This was something different, something that felt like betrayal. What about Kevin? Robert's pen stopped moving for just a second. Then he forced a smile that looked like it hurt. I'm not sure what you're asking. Kevin Bradley, the new operations manager, he started 8 months ago. The smile got tighter. I can't discuss another employee's compensation with you, Mac. You know that. He's making nearly double my salary, isn't he? Robert set his pen down carefully, buying time. Kevin brings different qualifications to the organization. He has an MBA from a prestigious business school. He has strategic vision that aligns with executive objectives. I let those words hang there for a moment. Different qualifications. In the Air Force, qualifications meant you could keep a C-130's navigation systems working when lives depended on it. You either knew how to troubleshoot hydraulic pressure sensors during combat operations or you didn't. There wasn't any MBA that taught you how to prevent catastrophic equipment failure when 200 workers' safety was on the line. And I have 28 years of building every automation system this plant runs, I said evenly. I've personally prevented at least 24 major accidents that could have killed people. I've saved this company millions in avoided downtime and OSHA penalties. But Kevin has an MBA, so that's worth twice as much. Different roles command different market rates, Robert said, his voice getting that careful HR neutrality. Leadership positions are benchmarked differently than technical positions. So technical expertise is worth half of what a business degree is worth, even when that technical expertise is literally keeping people alive. Mac, I understand you're frustrated. I'm not frustrated. I interrupted. I'm clarifying. Because it sounds like you're telling me that someone with zero understanding of our production systems, zero experience with our equipment, and zero contribution to actually keeping this plant running safely is worth twice what I am. I just want to make sure I'm hearing that correctly. Robert folded his hands on the table. Professional, controlled, unmoved by logic or fairness. We benchmark compensation against external market data. Leadership roles command premium salaries. Credentials matter. Translation, know your place. I thought about my ex-wife Linda's medical bills, the ones insurance wouldn't cover. I thought about my daughter Sarah's graduate school loans, $45,000 still outstanding. I thought about the Ford 401k that had taken a beating in the last market downturn, the fact that I was 47 years old and supposedly in my peak earning years, but watching younger guys with less experience pull down salaries I'd never seen. Then I reached into my bag. Robert tensed slightly, probably thinking I was pulling out a legal document or a list of grievances. Instead, I took out a single piece of paper, folded once, and placed it on top of his compensation document. My resignation letter, his eyes dropped to it. I watched the blood drain from his face as he read the first line. Effective immediately, I resigned from my position as Senior Network Operations Engineer at Titan Manufacturing. Mac, he started, voice cracking. I sent a copy to your inbox at 9:04 a.m., I said calmly. You'll see it when you check your email along with copies to my direct supervisor, the plant manager, and the VP of operations. He blinked at the signature, at the date, at words that couldn't be taken back or negotiated away. You don't need to make this decision right now. This is a significant step. Talk to your supervisor. Sleep on it. We can revisit the numbers. I've been sleeping on it for 28 years, I said, standing up. This is me waking up. Robert opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. But Robert, I said, picking up my bag, You told me to understand my position in this organization. So I do, and my position is somewhere else. I left the resignation letter on the table and walked out. The click of the conference room door closing behind me was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in years. Let me back up and tell you how a quiet, underpaid automation engineer and one dismissive sentence in a management meeting turned into the most expensive 47 minutes in Titan manufacturing history. My name is Mac Thompson. I'm 47 years old, divorced, father of a daughter in graduate school, and a son who just started his apprenticeship at the local electrical union. I don't have an MBA. I don't have an Ivy League degree. What I have is a mechanical engineering degree from State, 12 years in the Air Force working on aircraft systems, and 28 years of institutional knowledge about a manufacturing automation system so complex that it required constant vigilance just to keep it running safely. The Air Force shaped how I approach everything. When you're responsible for keeping a transport aircraft's hydraulic systems operational during combat missions, you learn that lives depend on systems working exactly as designed. You don't get to blame someone else when navigation goes down during a storm. You don't get to make excuses when environmental controls fail at altitude. You fix it, document what went wrong, and make sure it doesn't happen again. That discipline served me well when I started at Titan Manufacturing in 1996, right after I finished my degree on the GI Bill. Back then, they were a mid-sized steel producer trying to compete with plants 10 times their size. On paper, they provided structural steel for construction and infrastructure projects. In reality, they ran a collection of production systems held together with outdated controls, manual processes, and the desperate prayers of 2 exhausted technicians. The plant produced steel beams, rebar, and custom fabrication for major construction projects. When those systems went down, real consequences followed. Workers could get hurt, environmental systems could fail. Production schedules that fed into billion-dollar construction projects could collapse. Safety wasn't just about following regulations. It was about making sure the guy operating the furnace went home to his family every night. My interview was with Charles Morrison, the plant engineer at the time, who'd built his career on actual technical work before getting promoted into management. He understood that industrial automation wasn't just about installing software and hoping for the best. Can you keep this infrastructure from falling apart? He asked, gesturing at a whiteboard covered in system diagrams that looked more like a disaster than a production plan. Depends, I said. Can I actually fix things, or will I just be putting out fires? If you can justify the changes, he said you can make them. He hired me that afternoon. For the first month, I just observed. I sat in on emergency calls, read incident reports, trace system flows, talk to the technicians who'd been there long enough to know where all the problems were buried. The pattern was clear: reactive management, no proactive monitoring, and documentation that was either missing or dangerously outdated. The second month, I started documenting failure patterns, not theoretical problems, but real failures that had actually happened. Every time something broke, I wrote it down in my notebook. What failed, why it failed, what the warning signs were, whether the fix actually worked or just delayed the next failure. I kept a physical notebook because digital documentation has a way of disappearing when budgets get tight or priorities change. By the third month, I'd identified 18 critical vulnerabilities in our production systems. I documented them, quantified the risk, estimated the cost to fix versus the cost of failure. When I presented it to Charles, he asked the only question that mattered: how much to fix all of this? 18 months of dedicated work, I said, and the authority to push back when people want shortcuts. You have both, he said. I rebuilt the monitoring infrastructure first because you can't fix what you can't see. Created dashboards that showed not just whether systems were working, but how close they were to failure. Vibration analysis, temperature trends, pressure variations, all the early warning signs that let you prevent disasters instead of just responding to them. Then I rebuilt the automation protocols properly: real redundancy, automated safety shutoffs, comprehensive logging. The Allen Bradley PLCs that controlled our main furnace operations were 15 years old when I started. I didn't replace them. I made them work better than they had when they were new. By the end of year 1, we had actual visibility into our production systems. By year 2, I'd trained 3 junior technicians on proper maintenance procedures. By year 3, I was the person everyone called when things went sideways. Not because I was officially on call, but because I was the only one who'd seen these specific failure patterns before. I became the institutional memory nobody wanted to admit they depended on, and for a while, that was fine. The company grew. We added more production capacity, more complexity. Revenue increased from $87 million to $340 million over my tenure. The board was happy. Executives got their bonuses. I got a 3.1% raise and a coffee mug that said "World's Best Engineer." I didn't complain, not because I didn't care, but because I believed that eventually competence would be recognized, that good work would be rewarded, that loyalty would be returned. The plant safety record improved dramatically. We went from 12 reportable incidents per year to 0 for the last 4 years running. O'Shea Asian inspectors started using us as an example of best practices, but none of that showed up on any spreadsheet that the executives looked at. What they saw was a line item for senior network operations engineer with a salary that hadn't kept pace with inflation, let alone with the value I was creating. That was my first mistake. I thought competence spoke for itself. I thought keeping people safe and systems running would be enough. I thought loyalty would be reciprocated. The shift started 2 years ago when Titan decided it needed to professionalize its leadership structure. That was the phrase used by the new CEO, Alan Foster, former consultant brought in by the board to scale the business. Alan loved words like optimize and operational excellence and strategic alignment. He did not love words like safety margins or redundant systems, or that's going to break if we don't maintain it properly. Within 6 months of Alan taking over, the company started hiring differently. Less emphasis on people who understood how things worked, more emphasis on people who could make things sound impressive in board meetings. We got managers with MBAs who'd never operated a forklift. We got directors who could talk about driving efficiency but couldn't explain what a PLC actually controlled. We got consultants billing $500 an hour to tell us we should leverage cloud-native paradigms for systems that had been running perfectly fine for decades. And we got Kevin Bradley, MBA from a top-tier business school, 6 years at a consulting firm, 0 manufacturing experience. His title, operations manager. His job, align production initiatives with business objectives and drive strategic optimization of legacy infrastructure. Translation, make everything sound good in PowerPoint presentations while people like me did the actual work. I discovered the pay disparity by accident, and it hit me like a physical blow. I was looking for a maintenance manual Eric Walsh had promised to upload when I clicked the wrong file. Kevin Bradley's offer letter, base salary $127,000. Signing bonus $15,000, annual bonus target 20%. Stock options 8,000 shares. I stared at those numbers for a long time. Then I opened my most recent pay stub. Base salary $78,400, no signing bonus. Annual bonus target 3%, which I'd received exactly once in 28 years. Stock options 500 shares from my original offer. Nothing since. 8 months at the company, 0 manufacturing knowledge, 0 systems saved from catastrophic failure, making 62% more than I was. The math was simple, and it was devastating. I closed both files and sat there in my cubicle for a very long time, staring at nothing. The plant buzzed around me, machines humming, workers discussing production schedules that suddenly seemed meaningless. I felt like I was watching it all through glass. That evening, I went home to my empty apartment and did something I hadn't done in 6 years. I updated my resume, really updated it. Not just the annual courtesy refresh for HR files. I documented every major system I'd built, every crisis I'd prevented, every innovation I'd implemented that saved the company money or reduced risk. The list was longer than I expected. The thermal management overhaul that prevented the furnace explosion in 2018. The safety interlock redesign that stopped the chemical spill before it reached the storm drains in 2020. The predictive maintenance system that caught bearing failures 3 weeks before catastrophic breakdown, saving $400,000 in emergency repairs and lost production. I sent my resume to 3 recruiters I'd been ignoring for years. Within 48 hours, my phone was ringing. Within 2 weeks, I had 4 serious offers. Within 3 weeks, I'd accepted 1. Principal Systems Engineer at Advanced Manufacturing Solutions, $95,000 base salary, 18% bonus target, real stock options. All I needed was the right moment to leave Titan. Robert gave it to me. By 9:12 a.m., my security badge had been flagged for deactivation. By 9:18 a.m., my system access was being revoked across 15 production environments. By 9:23 a.m., I'd cleared my desk, boxed up my tools and that coffee mug that said World's Best Engineer, and walked past 4 colleagues who suddenly became very interested in their workbenches. By 9:31 a.m., the first critical alarm started screaming. Here's what most people don't understand about complex manufacturing automation. It's not like a car where you can pop the hood and see what's broken. It's more like a human body. Interconnected systems that depend on each other in ways that aren't always obvious. When something goes wrong, the symptoms can show up anywhere. And finding the root cause requires knowing how all the pieces fit together. I'd been that institutional memory for 28 years. Every weird configuration choice, every undocumented dependency, every workaround that had become critical infrastructure, it was all in my head, backed up by that physical notebook I kept locked in my desk drawer. The notebook they didn't know existed. By 9:38 a.m., every technician in the building was in emergency mode. The primary steel furnace was throwing cascading errors. Not complete failure, that would have been obvious. Instead, it was degrading slowly, temperature controls fluctuating, safety interlocks triggering false alarms while missing actual hazards. Eric Walsh, the junior technician I'd been mentoring, was on call. Poor kid was 24 years old with 14 months of experience, suddenly responsible for systems he'd only seen from the outside. He checked the runbook I'd written 2 years ago, but the runbook covered normal failure modes. This wasn't normal. What was happening was a cascade failure in the thermal management system triggered by a specific combination of production load and ambient temperature. I'd seen it exactly once before, 16 months earlier during a particularly hot summer day. I documented the solution in my notebook along with the monitoring queries needed to detect it early, the notebook that was now sitting in the trunk of my truck. Eric escalated to Diana Rodriguez, our senior technician. Deanna was good, smart, dedicated with 6 years of experience, but she'd never seen this particular failure mode because I'd fixed it quietly the last time, added some monitoring to catch it early, and moved on to the next problem. Diana did everything right. She opened multiple diagnostic screens, examined log files, looked for patterns. She could see the symptoms: temperature fluctuations increasing, safety system cycling, production efficiency dropping, but she couldn't see the cause. The Allen Bradley PLC controlling the main furnace was responding to commands, but the responses weren't making sense. Pressure readings that should have been stable were oscillating. Temperature sensors were reporting values that contradicted each other. At 10:15 a.m., Kevin Bradley walked into the control room. In my mind, I could picture him perfectly. Pressed khakis, button-down shirt, that slight smile that said he was about to solve everything with strategic thinking. "Why is the dashboard red?" he asked. "We're investigating a thermal management issue with the main furnace," Diana replied, not looking up from her screens. "Investigating doesn't help our production schedules. Can't you just restart it?" I can only imagine the look Diana gave him. In manufacturing, just restart it is like a surgeon saying just cut it out without knowing what it is. You can make things much worse very quickly. "We need to identify the root cause first," Diana said. "If we restart without understanding the problem, we could trigger a complete system failure. The furnace is running at 2,800 degrees. A cascade failure could damage equipment worth millions and put workers at risk. How long will that take? I don't know." "This isn't a standard failure mode." Kevin pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Alan." Alan Foster arrived 8 minutes later. I knew him well enough to picture his reaction. The carefully controlled expression that meant he was calculating damage control. The way he'd scan the room to identify who he could blame if this became a board-level problem. "Where's Mac?" he asked, the question I'd been waiting for. "He resigned this morning," Kevin said, "over a compensation issue. I would have paid money to see Alan's face in that moment you let him walk today." "I didn't let him do anything," Kevin said defensively. "He made an irrational decision. Alan left immediately. I know because at exactly 10 to 51 a.m., 47 minutes after I'd placed that resignation letter on Robert's desk, Alan Foster was standing outside my apartment, knocking on my door like someone whose entire world was falling apart. Which technically it was. "Mac," he said, not bothering with pleasantries when I opened the door, "we need you back immediately." I looked at him through the gap in my doorway. His normally immaculate suit was wrinkled, tie loosened, hair disheveled. This was a man who prided himself on control, on having contingency plans for contingency plans. Seeing him rattled was almost worth 28 years of being undervalued. Almost. "I don't work there anymore," I said. "I know, but our main production line is completely down. We're losing $223 million per day. Nobody can figure out why." "That sounds like your problem, not mine." His jaw clenched. "Mac, please, just for today, we'll pay you consulting rate whatever you want." I shook my head slowly. "No." "Why not?" "Because 47 minutes ago, your company made it very clear what I'm worth to them. So now you get to learn what your systems are worth without me." I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Alan knocked 3 more times, each series more desperate than the last. Then I heard his footsteps retreating down the hallway, probably back to his car, back to a crisis that was getting worse by the minute. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down to fill out onboarding paperwork for Advanced Manufacturing Solutions. My phone buzzed with text messages, missed calls, emergency notifications from systems I no longer had access to. I ignored all of it. The outage lasted 14 hours. I didn't watch it happen in real time, but I heard about it later from Diana, who was still willing to talk to me after everything settled. Here's what I missed. By 2 p.m., 3 major construction projects were behind schedule. The steel beams for the new hospital in downtown couldn't be delivered. The rebar for the highway expansion project was stalled. Union workers at those job sites were standing idle, costing their contractors thousands in labor penalties. By 4 p.m., Allen had called an industrial crisis response, an emergency consulting firm that specialized in manufacturing disasters. The lead consultant spent 5 hours examining our systems and finally admitted what everyone already knew. Without the original engineer, this could take days to fully understand and stabilize. Allen looked at Tony Rivera, the current plant manager. "You're telling me we're dead in the water because one engineer quit?" "I'm telling you we're dead in the water because we treated that engineer like he didn't matter," Tony said. "And now we're learning what happens when he's not here to keep us running." The consulting firm worked through the night. They brought in 4 specialists, set up a command center, and started systematically going through every piece of our infrastructure. At $850 per hour per consultant, the bill was climbing towards $75,000 before they'd even identified the problem. The breakthrough came at 1:17 a.m. when Eric finally remembered something I'd mentioned in passing 8 months earlier. There was an old documentation file buried in our system, something I'd written after a similar incident years ago. It took him 3 hours to find it because the file naming convention I'd used didn't match the current corporate standards. Critical system dependencies and emergency recovery procedures. It had everything. The thermal cascade issue, the specific diagnostic queries, the exact sequence of steps needed to recover without triggering secondary failures. I'd written it 20 months ago after the last time this happened, and nobody had read it until they had no choice. Eric followed my documentation step by step. It worked. System stabilized. The consultants packed up and sent a bill for $89,000. The crisis was over, but the damage was done. The union filed a grievance citing safety concerns about unqualified management making operational decisions. 2 major clients canceled contracts, citing reliability concerns. The insurance company demanded a full review of operational procedures before renewing coverage. Within 2 weeks, Tony Rivera reached out to me. Professional email, carefully worded, offering $110,000 base salary, 15% annual bonus, title bump to principal systems engineer. "I know we failed you," the email said. "I'm asking for a chance to make it right." I read it 3 times, then responded, "I appreciate the offer, but I've already started at my new company. I'm happy here. I hope you can rebuild your system successfully," because I was happy. Advanced Manufacturing Solutions was everything Titan wasn't. The CEO, Dr. Patricia Anderson, had spent 15 years doing actual engineering work before moving into leadership. She understood that manufacturing wasn't a business problem you could solve with strategy meetings and PowerPoint presentations. "What's the worst incident you ever responded to?" she asked during my final interview. I told her about the chemical spill we'd prevented in 2020, how I'd traced the leak through 4 different system alerts and shut down the line before hazardous materials reached the storm drains. She nodded slowly. "If you join us, that kind of knowledge won't sit in someone's head or a personal notebook. It'll be documented, shared, and built into our processes. We've learned that talented people leave. When they do, we need to make sure the organization retains what they knew. Starting salary, $95,000, bonus target, 18%. Stock options, 12,000 shares. But more than the money, it was respect. On my first day, Patricia introduced me to the engineering team. This is Mac Thompson. He's joining us as principal systems engineer. He has more real-world crisis response experience than most of us combined. When he tells you something about manufacturing safety, listen, because he's earned that authority through 28 years of keeping critical systems running. No qualifiers. No, he's just a technical person. Just respect. Within 6 months, I'd rebuilt their monitoring infrastructure using everything I'd learned at Titan, but properly documented this time. Within a year, I'd trained 4 other engineers to the point where they could handle major incidents independently, not because I was trying to make myself replaceable, but because I was building something sustainable. Today, I'm still at Advanced Manufacturing. I'm now senior principal engineer, the highest technical role in the company. I make $150,000 base salary. My bonus last year was $22,000. When we go public next year, my stock options will set me up for early retirement if I want it. But more than the money, I have something Titan never gave me, respect. When I say something's going to break, people listen. When I document a vulnerability, it becomes required reading. When I suggest we need to slow down and do something right, nobody tells me to understand my position, because my position is exactly where expertise should be. At the table, with a voice, being heard. Here's what I learned and what I want you to understand. If you're reading this and you're over 50, working in a technical field, watching younger people with less experience get promoted above you, feeling like your knowledge doesn't matter anymore. Listen to me. Your expertise doesn't become more valuable the moment you walk away. It was always that valuable, and some people knew it. The difference is that some organizations need to lose what they can't afford to lose before they learn to value what they should have treasured. Don't wait for them to figure it out. Know your worth. Document your value. And when someone tells you to understand your position, believe them. Then find an organization that understands what your real position should be.